The Lord of the Rings film trilogy has now graced us with its presence for over 20 years, and to this day, they still make us feel a whole spectrum of emotions. Tolkien's characters were handled with such care and respect, which is even more refreshing to look back on, given the treatment of legacy characters in media in the modern era. Given that I have talked predominantly about video game stories and characters on this channel, I thought it would be as good a time as ever, after the 20th anniversary of Return of the King, to tackle other forms of visual media on the channel as well. Over the last week or so, I decided to revisit the epic trilogy once again, as I have often done in the past, and I am just continually convinced that no portrayal of a story will ever come close to its quality in character writing. After all the times that I've watched these movies, they still make me laugh and cry with the same amount of fervor as the first time watching them. The biggest reason for this is because of all the amazing characters, and their clearly defined motivations and personalities. As a result of this nostalgic reminder, I decided I would dedicate a video to each of my favorite characters in the trilogy, and talk about why they are such amazing characters to me. I thought the best place to start would be with the Fellowship's most passionate character, Boromir of Gondor. The Fellowship of the Ring has the daunting task of introducing almost all the major characters in the story, and it is truly incredible the depth that we get for each of them. Even more so, I think it's incredible how much development the character of Boromir gets, given that he's only in roughly half the film. He is introduced to us in Rivendell, coming across Aragorn next to the display for the sword that cut the ring from Sauron's hand. This is a perfect intro to set up what will be Boromir's most relevant relationship in the first film. He comes face to face with the person who is the true heir to all that he protects, but he does not know it. We also get an amazing visual metaphor of his personality, as he holds the kingly blade, only to be stared down by its rightful holder. He then releases the power in his grasp, only to comment on how the strength behind the blade has long since been irrelevant in the wake of the current struggles he and his people face. As soon as the ring is set before everyone, he is the first one to speak under his breath,
So it is true,
alluding to all the rumors that the weapon of the enemy has been found. Immediately, he is also the first one to speak audibly in front of everybody, as he slowly gets out of his chair and approaches the ring.
I saw the eastern sky grow dark, but in the west a pale light lingered. The voice was crying, "Your doom is near at hand. Isildur's bane is found."
We can see clearly that he is desperate. Right off the bat, we get an introduction to what Boromir fears and what he wants, all in the span of just a couple minutes. He elaborates on these motives more clearly after Gandalf stops him from approaching and speaks of the ring's inherent evil. He speaks of using the ring against Sauron, and that his people have been the ones dying to protect the free peoples of Middle-earth. Aragorn corrects him by saying that none can wield the ring. Flippantly, Boromir responds by asking what a ranger would know about it. Then he gets to learn the identity of the true heir to the very kingdom he fights for. This sets up a dichotomy between the humble vagabond that has rejected his birthright and the fearful and brash protector of Gondor. This brilliant introduction of characterization is capped off by highlighting Boromir's pride when he says,
Gondor has no king. Gondor needs no king.
After much arguing and deliberating, it is decided that Frodo will take the ring to Mordor to be destroyed. Understanding the weight of the consequences that could happen, Boromir decides to join the Fellowship with these words.
Carry the fate of us all, little one. If this is indeed the will of the Council, then Gondor will see it done.
Even though we see his pride, we also see his nobility. We can see that he carries a great weight of responsibility, and he will see the resolution to his battles won personally as part of that responsibility. Right from the get-go, we understand how conflicted of a character he is, and what he wants because of that conflict. This is definitely one of the best character introductions to a character that I've seen in a film, summarizing their characterization in just a handful of lines. The next significant moment we have with Boromir is him playfully sword fighting with the younger hobbits. This establishes his fatherly tendencies as a protector and creates a good moment of highlighting his good traits. We get to see that he's not just noble in word, but truly cares for the emotional state of his companions in just a small window of time before any real physical harm comes towards the Fellowship. This also foreshadows his role in protecting the younger hobbits later, so this scene also establishes that relationship early. The bravery and nobility of men is constantly tested by temptation. This weakness that men have is embodied by how the ring affects them. Boromir gets a direct interaction with the ring on the Fellowship's way up the mountain Caradhras. Interestingly though, he has a self-awareness about his emotions as he holds the ring close to himself.
It is a strange fate that we should suffer so much fear and doubt over so small a thing.
This once again plays out the dichotomy between him and Aragorn, as Aragorn sternly tells him to give the ring back to Frodo. This scene is meant to establish his weakness in the face of temptation, but I'd also like to highlight the fact that he was able to be snapped out of his trance and was willing to do the right thing and return the ring. This highlights a strength that we have seen rejected by kings in the past. Isildur could not give up the ring when prompted, and it caused him to die while running in fear of losing his life. Boromir's default state is a protector, as we've seen so far, and he tries to retain his humanity after giving the ring back by dishonestly saying,
"I cannot,"
and giving Frodo a pat on the head. This obviously comes off as insecure, but upon multiple viewings of this movie, I can see that this is not a bad man, but a conflicted good one, desperate for a way to save his people. Due to that emotional state, he is vulnerable to temptation. As the Fellowship is forced into Moria, we get to see Boromir show his courage in application. He fights bravely to defend his comrades, obviously willing to take the hits, but he gets this small, really awesome moment where he gets to see Aragorn save his life. I would just like to highlight that this builds the respect in that relationship in a small but profound way. We also get to see his fatherly side come out multiple times, when he grabs the two young hobbits and jumps across the stair gap, as well as when he holds Frodo back from running towards Gandalf in his fight against the Balrog. Furthermore, we see even more of his empathetic humanity when Aragorn, taking on the role of leadership, tells the larger companions to get the hobbits up and moving.
Give them a moment, for pity's sake!
This moment both highlights the strengths and weaknesses of Boromir as a leader compared to his kingly counterpart. He is deeply in touch with the loss that was just experienced, but in the face of danger, is planted in the moment rather than thinking ahead. It does highlight that he is willing to listen to orders, though, when presented with reason, as Aragorn does when he states why they cannot linger. This is also another great small moment, highlighting Aragorn's natural leadership, and juxtaposing it with Boromir's unrelenting adherence to protecting those he feels responsible for. Moving on to Lothlorien, we get what is probably my second favorite moment with Boromir. When all the other members of the Fellowship seemed distracted or distant from Frodo, Boromir had an authentic moment of wise insight for Frodo. He tells him,
Gandalf's death was not in vain, nor would he have you give up hope. You carry a heavy burden, Frodo. Don't carry the weight of the dead.
This scene always directly makes me think of his victory speech in Osgiliath, where, despite the harsh battle he obviously had to go through, given the state of his city, he celebrates what his men fought for, and shares that victory with the one closest to him. He is always willing to look for the optimistic solution, even if he is wrong in his methods for doing so. When he tells Frodo not to carry the weight of the dead, it is much like when he tells Faramir,
Remember today, little brother.
It's not dismissive of the loss and pain, but it's a positive wisdom to move on with life and continue to fight for what is good. This is also amazing that he would say this to Frodo, given Frodo's development through the films, fighting against his own hopelessness. It really highlights that Boromir is a good man at heart, and that even the best men can fall short in an imperfect world. We then get a beautiful exchange between our two dichotomy characters. Aragorn tells Boromir he should take some rest, but Boromir is restless. Boromir then speaks of what the Lady Galadriel told him in his head.
She spoke of my father and the fall of Gondor. She said to me, "Even now there is hope left, but I cannot see it."
We can truly see the doubt and fear he is wrestling with. He then acknowledges the failing nobility of his father's rule, and the growing hopelessness of his people. He says that all the pressure is on him to make things right. He then asks Aragorn if he has ever seen the White City's beauty. Aragorn reminiscently says that he has long ago, with a tone of apprehension, but then Boromir confidently responds,
"One day, our paths will lead us there, and the Tower Guard shall take up the call. The Lords of Gondor have returned."
This is the first time we see Boromir truly inspire the destiny that is within Aragorn, and highlight the goodness that is in men that Aragorn has come to doubt over the years. This foreshadows what Aragorn will become, but it also, tragically, is not a fate that Boromir will share in. As the Fellowship makes camp, Boromir suggests that the Fellowship should regroup at Minas Tirith, to which Aragorn responds,
"There is no strength in Gondor that can avail us."
Boromir responds with,
Have you so little faith in your own people? Yes, there is weakness. There is courage also, and honor to be found in men.
He then confronts Aragorn on his fear of men, and how he has been hiding from his responsibilities his whole life. But Aragorn will not relent, recognizing that even the strongest of men before him cannot stand the temptation of the ring. Our next scene is the culmination of all of Boromir's negative traits coming to fruition. Frodo, feeling the weight of his burden, travels off alone into the woods, only to be confronted by Boromir. Boromir then tries to empathize with Frodo, but in a tone that is not his sincere self. Like all convincing dishonesty, though, he states a bit of truth by telling Frodo he sees him suffering day by day. He then pivots from this truthfulness by stating that there might be other ways to victory. Frodo admits that on the surface what he might suggest may seem like wisdom, but he knows inside of himself that it is not the way. Boromir then speaks of how the fear they all feel drives them to destroy what hope they have, and that it is madness. Ironically, Boromir wishes for this power because he is afraid that he cannot save his people. He then throws a tantrum, highlighting the childish immaturity of his desires. Frodo tries to tell him he's not himself, but his fear and lack of control take over him, to the point where he says that Frodo will fail. He then demands the ring, and physically tries to take it from Frodo. Frodo puts on the ring, and is able to escape, and gives Boromir a nice shove after shocking him with his disappearance. Falling on his face, along with getting away from the temptation, brings him back to his senses. He then whimpers that he is sorry. This is not his proudest moment, but it is a very human moment. We all fear what we cannot control, and Boromir is one of the most sincere characters to display that unironically. As is the case with the best of characters, we see them at their ugliest, generally before we see them at their best. Once we see why Boromir cannot be trusted with one type of responsibility, we instantly see him thrive in the type of responsibility he has always been best at. In the face of imminent death, he fights to defend the two hobbits that he has grown so protective of. He realizes his own weakness, and in his sorrow gains strength. He knows that he cannot wield the highest powers, but he does know that he has the power to lead and effect change in the smaller conflicts. He fulfills the role that his father never could, being a true steward of a power much greater than himself, being a symbol of man's nobility. He holds the line single-handedly and fights off many foes, but much like his people, he is overwhelmed by the powers of darkness. Even so, like we've seen in the Mines of Moria, he takes the hits and gets back up again. If he had taken the ring, perhaps his fate would have been like that of Isildur, shot in the back by 3 arrows, while running away to protect his addiction. Instead, we get to see him far away from the temptation of the ring, saving the lives of others, and taking 3 arrows to the front of his body, as he faces the darkness in strength. He fights for the purity and innocence of the hobbits, just as he fought for the good days of peace in Gondor. But, before he is completely undone by evil, he is then saved by his king, taking the weight of responsibility off of his shoulders. When Aragorn rushes to his side, Boromir's first words are,
They took the little ones.
even on death's doorstep, he is thinking of the lives of those that he loves. He then asks about Frodo, to which Aragorn responds that he let him go. Boromir then admits his sins, saying that he tried to take the ring from Frodo. He then asks for forgiveness, saying that he has failed all of them. Aragorn then corrects him, as a king would his warrior, and tells him, "You fought bravely, and you have kept your honor." Despairingly, Boromir laments the fall of man to the coming darkness, but then Aragorn comforts him with,
I do not know what strength is in my blood, but I swear to you I will not let the White City fall, nor our people fail.
Boromir then, with one last hopeful expression, repeats,
Our people.
and what proceeds next always brings me straight to tears.
I would have followed you, my brother, my captain, my king.
Boromir then dies in the arms of his king, relinquishing the responsibility of saving his people, going from fearful and hopeless to putting hope in the goodness and ability of others. His character arc of going from someone trying to control everything to a noble relinquishing of higher responsibility is one of the most beautiful stories I've ever seen in a film. His sacrifice will always be why he is my favorite character in Fellowship of the Ring, and it truly is an honest reflection of what a good man is, flaws and all. I hope that all of us can admit our weaknesses with humility and strive to be as noble as Boromir.